Maria Giovanna, the attachment is there. Senza legato, no? It's there. For the interpreters, in the email that I sent it to you, it's not an attachment, it's a link to Google Drive. There is an echo. Okay. But actually it's a link to Google Drive for the interpreters. Well, I'm sending it to you again, but it's a link.
Patricia, gentilmente chiedere alle co-host di spegnere il loro microfono quando non parlano, ok? Anche i co-host.
Okay.
Grazie.
This is for the speakers. While you don't speak, please mute yourself so there is no echoes. So welcome to all. You can choose your language. You know how to do it now. Bienvenidas, bienvenidos. Pueden seleccionar el idioma abajo en el icono interprétation. Vous pouvez choisir la langue en bas. Il y a le symbole du monde. Vous pouvez choisir français. We are going to start in a few minutes. You all know that we usually record our webinars. So if you don't want to appear with your camera, you can just switch it off. And during the webinar, we will mute all the participants' microphones. So then we will open again when we have the dialogue session.
I still have permission to log
Hi,
on.
Cecilia.
Hi, how are
Yeah,
you?
very well. And
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you very well. We can't see you, but we can
I'm
hear
doing
you.
well, thank you. Yeah, I said I must still have permission to log on. Get me off the login early list. So I'll go hide now for a while.
Okay.
Thanks.
You're
Nice
welcome.
to see you.
The people are joining us. Welcome, bienvenidas, bienvenue. Vous pouvez choisir la langue, pueden seleccionar el idioma. In a few minutes, we are going to start. This is the last webinar before the summer break, at least for this part of the world.
Welcome. We'll get started in a few moments. We're just allowing our attendees to join us. That number will continue to grow, and we'll get started in a few minutes.
Recording in progress.
The interpreters should unmute themselves before we start. Welcome to all. Bienvenidas, bienvenue. We are going to start, so just choose your language down below. Estamos casi empezando. Pueden seleccionar el idioma abajo. Vous pouvez choisir la langue. We are going to record this meeting. So if you don't want to appear with your camera, you can just stop the camera.
Yes, welcome. We are at the top of the hour, and our participant list will continue to grow, but we will go ahead and get started. I would like to welcome you on behalf of UISG and CWR Academy to our collaboration together on social media and visibility. My name is Robert Cogswell, and I'm the Director of Communications for the Sisters of St. Joseph of Orange and a member of the Education Committee for CWR.
Sorry, this is Patricia, the Communication Officer of UISG. And I want to welcome mainly all the international participants today.
Thank you. Well, we'll get started with a few guidelines in just a moment, but first I'm going to share a screen here so we can start, as we often do, with a prayer. Loving and gracious God, lead us to nurture relationships in the digital space in ways that honor you and are uplifting to our sisters and brothers. Guide us to respond with love to current events, comments, and conversations. Inspire us to channel creative talent to connect people with you and to each other. May we shine your light in environments often cloaked in darkness. Enable us to use new media tools effectively so we may reach those we could not imagine reaching before. Thank you for the wisdom and experience of today's speakers. We ask your blessing upon them and all of our attendees. Amen. Well, we have a few guidelines to share with you first. Many of you have done this before. I'll go ahead and let Patricia take the next step.
Thank you, Robert. This is just to inform you that we are recording the 3 languages available, which are French, English, and Spanish. And from tomorrow on, you will find it in the YouTube channel of the UISG and CWR.
The speakers will be featured obviously on the screen, but at the time where we're able to ask questions that you made appear on screen briefly, you can ask questions via the chat or the Q&A feature or in the comments. We will begin with our panelists first, yet there will be time dedicated to answer your questions after our presenters have shared their information. Patricia will also be listening and helping facilitate dialogue among attendees and our panel. And as you've already heard, the webinar is being recorded for later viewing on CWR's website as well as UISG's YouTube channel. So as we get started, I'd like to introduce our panel. We are welcoming Elizabeth Powers, who is the Electronics Communications Manager from the Congregation of St. Joseph in Cleveland, Ohio. And Laura, hopefully I can pronounce your name correctly, Laura Mor Iriarte, Director of Portal Catalunya Religio in Barcelona, Spain. And Sister Oriane Dick, who's the social media coordinator, who's a Canadian daughter of St. Paul in the province of the United States and Canada, but serving in Boston, Massachusetts. And she will be talking about TikTok and the gospel on the digital continent. I love that title. And you may have seen her on featured BBC World News, how religion is booming on TikTok and Instagram. So as I said, we will try and share, we encourage your questions and conversation, but we're going to focus on our panelists first. And we will start with Elizabeth Powers.
Thank you so much, Rob, and thank you everyone for being with us today. I am going to share my screen with you all and share just some clips today. What I'm going to be sharing is some information about best practices for social media, specifically Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And also what to do when things go wrong, right? How to prepare for problems that might come about from using social media. So as we said in our prayer, social media is another place for us to build community, as sisters have been building community for years. By taking part in social media, we're situating ourselves in these places of community and building relationships with others. And showing the good work of sisters, associates, and partners in mission from all over the world. So for my purposes today, I want to just give a few statistics about why we use what we use for social media. So for Facebook, 1.62 billion users on average visit Facebook every day. So just under a quarter of the population of the whole world. Users age 65 and older, currently the fastest growing population in the US on Facebook, but 84% of US millennials are still on Facebook. And it's still the largest social platform among consumers and marketers. So even though I've heard some people say they no longer think Facebook is relevant, we really at the Congregation of St. Joseph believe it's a good place for us to be. Our best, largest number of followers currently is there. We have about 8,500 followers on Facebook. And a large percentage of our sisters use Facebook and not any other social media. So for us, it just makes a lot of sense to continue to be on Facebook. Twitter has 211 million daily active users, which is a number up from last year. So Twitter continues to grow. Currently, 18 to 29 is the largest age group, and it's still known mostly as a place to share about events, breaking news, which is still how we use it today with the congregation. And then Instagram, 2 billion monthly active users still on Instagram, and the largest age group is 25 to 34-year-olds, and with 18 to 24-year-olds being close behind. It used to once be sort of the hip platform, and there are less teenagers on it now, but it's still a younger audience and a really great place to be while you're trying to reach younger people. So tips and best practices. I just wanted to go through a few things that might be helpful to you. Some of these you might already know, but it's always good to sort of dive a little deeper into what some of these best practices might be. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was defining your audience. So it's so important to have a good sense of who your audience is and who you want it to be, and make sure you're using the platforms that is going to reach those people who you are most interested in reaching, and use platforms accordingly. And also share what's important to your followers not just what's important to you, which can be really hard to do, right? But your followers want to be in a relationship with you. They don't just want to be consuming the content you want to give them. You want to make sure that you are sharing what's important. And this is always true, but especially when you're creating campaigns or trying to grow your follower base. So you really want to think about, am I where the right age group for me is? And also, am I sharing the content that they like and want to engage with me in? And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. So creating content, some tips here. As I think most of us probably know, photos and video are just always going to be more successful than just putting out comments in word form or in links. Make sure you're using really good quality photo and video whenever possible. And when using links, statistically, links get the least engagement of all posts. So if you want to make sure that your followers are getting those links, make sure you're using great photos with those as well. And of course, on Instagram, you must have a visual piece, right, in order to post. A note on Instagram links, again, probably widely known, but try not to put your links into the written content itself. Instagram doesn't allow for live links. Best practice is to include a link in your bio, and especially consider using something like a link tree. These are services that will allow you to put all of your links in one place and have them link through your bio. So you're not having to change it out every day. And for us, we actually made a page on our website where we change out all of our links directly through our website and link there in our bio on this page. It allows for us the web traffic to stay directly on our site. So for us, that has really worked out well. Photos can be really tricky for us, and probably for some of your congregations as well. We are a reconfigured community. So we have 7 congregations that came together over 10 years ago now. And as a result, we have sisters in a wide variety of locations across the US and also in Japan. So who's sending you your photos? Making sure you have a network of people who are willing to send you really great photo and video that will help create your content. And if you're not getting that content you want, making sure you're able to sort of reach out and get it as well. Live videos also are still doing very well on Facebook. They make your audience often feel like they're part of the discussion, as if they're in the room speaking to the sisters themselves. For us, we've done these past several years once a week for Advent and Lent. A different sister will offer a short prayer and reflection on Facebook Live, and they've been really successful for us. Our audience really enjoys them. And in order to encourage further reach for those, we even boost posts. Use creative options whenever appropriate, especially for campaigns. And I've offered 2 examples here of a campaign we did for this past Giving Tuesday. We wanted to use pictures of our sisters, and we wanted to include all of our tagline and information, but we didn't want so much text, right, in the copy. So we used Canva for this campaign to create a similar look for all of our photos that we used along with our text, but that included all of that information and hashtags, and that did very well for us. So things like Canva can be really great resources. It has a free option, which is really nice if you have a smaller budget. And to that end, keep your language short and precise on all platforms, right? And if you have trouble doing that, a great way to start is trying to get your Twitter content ready first. That really makes you think about what words are important, since you have a limited number of characters, and it might help you sort of trim down some of your content. Some of the struggle we find with people sometimes is if you're used to writing content for print media, say, or magazine articles, you might be used to writing a little bit longer. So really shortening up that precise language is really important. Data and analytics. I know that sometimes if you have a smaller staff, it's hard to not ignore the data, right? You just want to post and get things out. But the data can really be used to your advantage. Keep an eye on when your posts are performing their best. Determine what is posting and what kind of schedule makes the most sense for you. Look at data of the top cities of where your followers are and consider, are there cities where my congregation is, where sisters are ministering or reside that I don't have a lot of followers from? That might be a great place to start to build up more individuals to follow you. If you're surprised that there are cities that you don't have more followers from. And again, as I said, being from a reconfigured congregation, we had 7 different locations and realized that we didn't have many followers from some of those locations. And it really helped to sort of focus on some content to make sure we were getting people who are interested in our sisters and their work from all of those locations where our sisters are located. Keep an eye on which of your posts in the last week performed the best. What would people like to see? What do they want to keep knowing from you? How can you provide more of what your followers enjoyed engaging with? All these questions are going to help you create more engaging content for the people who already follow you. And sometimes it's not what you expect, or maybe even want it to be. I joke with my colleagues, I have the best social justice post in the world, but it's not going to do as well as the posts I make of Sister Mary's 99th birthday, because people have a personal relationship with her. So just knowing that what your followers like to see might not always be exactly what you want it to be. But if you get them in to follow you with those posts they're interested in, they'll stick around for your social justice initiatives and other things. And so keeping that in mind when you're thinking about posting. And also when to post is often a question we get. And it really also can depend on your personal data. Many studies have been done on this, but often, they'll say something slightly different. And we found the best way to determine what time to post for your community is most likely going to be told by seeing what posts do the best, depending on your personal time. For us, a time based upon a study isn't always helpful either, because again, we have sisters in many time zones. So rely on your personal data, see what's working best for you posting wise, and that's going to really help you post at the best times for your audience. A little quick about posting content. If you don't already, make sure you have a posting calendar and know your strategy ahead of time of what you're hoping to post. Especially if you have a smaller staff, having a calendar and remembering what your goals are of what you're planning to post can really help and be effective and make sure nothing slips through the cracks. So for example, for us, we aim for what we call is the rule of 25%. 25% of our content is stories about our sisters and what ministries they're doing or what they're up to right now. 25% is about our ministries and what our sponsor ministries and schools are currently engaged in. 25% is about our social justice issues. And 25% is prayer or other Catholic content such as feast days. And so having that percentage in mind as we're going through our calendar is really helpful, not only to me as the person who does most of our social media, but if anyone else has to pick it up for a few days, knowing what our plan is and what our strategy is ahead of time makes a really big difference. Also, scheduling out your social content is so important and so helpful. Again, especially if you're in a smaller office, knowing that you might have to pivot and change things every once in a while that you've already had scheduled out, things come up. We all know this from social justice issues arising to other events happening. But making sure you schedule out all of your social content is really key and can really help keep you on track with your strategy. You can use external posting options like Hootsuite or Buffer, or you can use the platforms themselves. Facebook Creator Studios allows you to schedule out Facebook and Instagram, and it's nice to have it in one place. Whereas you can, of course, schedule out tweets through Twitter ads. If you aren't looking to use a paid service, there are options. For Instagram and Twitter, use hashtags when they're relevant. Make sure you don't use too many, but enough. I believe for Instagram, best practice is currently 3 to 5, they say. And hashtags are really how people find trends or topics that they're interested in. So if it makes sense to you to use those hashtags, they're going to be important on Instagram and Twitter. Make sure to tag other accounts when appropriate. This alerts them that you're talking about them, right? It lets them potentially share the post as well and allows your followers to learn more about your partner organizations and ministries. And again, it's building up those relationships, right? Not just with your followers, but online relationships with your ministries, with the people who are working in mission with you. And we find that by really utilizing that tagging feature, we've built even better relationships with some of our ministries online. They send us more photos. They know we're going to share their content. And so they're more willing to sort of take part in some of the events online that we ask them to do. For a little while, we did what we called Ministry Mondays. And every Monday, we would post about a different ministry. And our ministries really loved. We were sharing all of this content about them, and it was really helpful. And utilize Facebook and Instagram stories whenever possible. These are great places to share content that can be viewed quickly. Often, typically, people watch stories back to back. So even if they're not always looking at your pages, they might be more likely to see your stories. Engage with commenters whenever it makes sense to do so. Respond quickly to private messages and invite individuals who like your post to follow you on Facebook. These are simple things, but they're, again, all about building community, engaging with people who are already involved with you on social media, and not just putting content out for others to consume. You don't have to respond to every comment, but important ones, questions, things like that. But we're out of time here. All right, and use ads wise. You don't need to be selling products to utilize ads. Make sure you know the ad rules and keep up with the changes. They change frequently. There were a lot of changes this spring to things you could do in ads. So always make sure you're up to date on those. And remember that you don't need a big budget. We have had plenty of things be successful for like $35 for a week. We boost a post, and it gets us a lot of interaction from followers. And I'll just really quickly go through some common social media problems and how to handle them. The common problems. These are all things I've seen in the last 6 months. Someone leaves a negative comment on one of your posts. A negative article or blog is published about your congregation. Someone disagrees with your social justice stance. You are alerted that an employee is making derogatory statements online, or a sister has said or published something that upsets the public. So the biggest thing I could tell you about this are to be prepared. And here are a couple things that I would suggest that can really help you in these instances. Have an overall crisis communication plan and make sure social media is included. Name who's responsible, in case of an emergency and what steps they're going to take. Have responses ready if you know that you're posting something that people are likely to disagree with. This is especially true of social justice issues. We've gotten negative responses for things like, we speak out about gun control. So be prepared if you know you're posting something like that. Know any social media rules outlined by your congregation or HR. We have a section in our employee handbook. Should a problem arise, I know who to contact. I know who else to contact in your congregation if you need to. If questions sometimes arise from maybe an archivist or your leadership team might need to get involved. It's so important to respond, not react. Make sure you know what you want to say and how you want to say it before you respond to any comment. Social media can be divisive, but we work really hard to interact with our followers, but it's important to keep your head about you and not react to negative comments. Know when you don't have to respond. Sometimes our silence can speak as loudly as our words. Know who's in your corner and also who may cause problems. Sometimes we have followers respond for us and they can say things we would never be able to say. I've had people respond and say, well, you clearly don't know the Sisters of St. Joseph if that's your comment to this post. And then I don't have to say anything back. It's great. I love when that happens. And know the difference between deleting a comment and hiding a comment and use those features wisely. We really try to, be respectful and have respectful conversation with others. So we try not to delete anything or even hide it unless it's really disrespectful or uses inappropriate language. So use those features sparingly to keep that communal feel around your pages. And lastly, pay attention to what is being said about you online. Use Google Alerts or any kind of social listening tools wisely, so you can be prepared if anything is coming up about your congregation that you might need to be prepared to speak to. And that's me. I hope that's helpful, and be happy to answer any questions at the end with everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm sure there are going to be questions. There are a few that are already popping up, so we'll catch up to you in a little bit. Before we move on to Laura, I did want to just mention, and if you're not following the chat, go ahead and take a look there. Brian is popping in different links, as he often does, into the chat that are useful resources. Also, as we move to our next speaker, if you're following in English, and our next speaker, Laura, will be speaking in Spanish, so go ahead and use that interpretation button so you can hear that, be part of the international community. So thank you, Laura. Welcome, and please take it away.
Thank you very much. Muchas gracias a todos. Para mí es un placer estar esta tarde con todos ustedes. Sería ilusión presentar a todo el mundo.
Laura, no te escuchamos muy bien, ¿eh?
A cabo en...
Laura, te escuchamos muy mal. Creo que con estos webinars tenemos no tenemos mucha suerte, porque siempre el orador español tiene mucha dificultad. Laura, no te escuchamos bien, tu conexión no está bien. It's the second time we have problem with the Spanish-speaking people. I think we can continue with Oriane, and Laura, if you can move in another place, because it's impossible to listen to you. So please move in another place. Hopefully the connection is better and we can continue with Oriane.
It looks like we are going to make an adjustment and see if we can get a better connection with Laura. So fortunately, we have another wonderful speaker. I'd like to welcome Sister Oriane Dick.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay, Robert?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, hello. Hola, bonjour. I was asked to talk to you all about TikTok. And TikTok is a very interesting kind of new and upcoming platform on what Pope Francis has called the digital continent. So I know that we're talking primarily about social media and visibility in this webinar. TikTok has a slightly different form in terms of how we can utilize it for visibility. So I just wanted to nuance that in regard to the specific platform. So a little history, I think, can help to understand what TikTok really is and how it came about and what form it has taken today. So TikTok initially was launched in 2016 from a Chinese technology company called ByteDance. And it took off very quickly on the international stage. So by 2020, it had over 2 billion downloads worldwide, which is pretty phenomenal. And that's across languages, across cultures, across countries. When TikTok first came onto the scene in North America, it got a lot of press in the newspaper because the FBI in the US was very concerned about how data was being collected from people's phones who chose to register for TikTok and what it was being used for. Those concerns have never been addressed. The younger generation just straight up didn't care, so they continued using TikTok. But it is, I think, just an important thing to keep in mind in terms of social media security and online security in however you choose to use your ministry on social media. It is very interesting to note that I think Elizabeth had mentioned earlier that Instagram was once kind of like that hip, teenagers were on it, and then they shifted as older generations started to join Instagram because they kind of wanted their own space, and they moved to TikTok. So what we call Generation Z in North America, that's people born from 1997 to 2012. It's kind of like the upcoming generation. They are now getting into their early 20s. That generation migrated to TikTok. TikTok has a lot of advantages in that it's a very short video sharing platform. So the videos are usually a minute at the very, very most. I even have found, I'm not Gen Z, but I have found myself kind of getting bored after 30 seconds. Like, I don't know if I want to stay on a video anymore, because it's true. These videos do start to shift your attention span and what you expect as to how information is shared. So the videos, because they are so short, they are very concise. They're often very witty. They're very engaging. There tends to be either a lot of movement or a lot of sass or a lot of personality to keep someone engaged for the short amount of time that the video lasts. And then along with the video, there's a very brief amount of characters you can use to describe the video in a written form if you are the creator of the video. It's kind of like Twitter in the sense that you have a very short character limit. So everything about this platform is concise. The videos are short, the writing is short. And then if people comment under your video, even the comment section has a character limit and it is extremely short. So if someone comments underneath, it can often come off as very jarring or almost rude, but really, usually, sometimes it is rude, but usually it's because they don't have the space to use polite words such as please, thank you. Like, there's no space. They just say what they have to say. That also means that, you know, as religious on TikTok, when we are responding to comments, we also have a very, very short amount of characters to use. So we have to be very careful as to how we respond to still show that respect and create a welcoming environment for people, and to use it effectively. So because TikTok is so big with Gen Z, it initially was kind of their platform, so to speak, but very soon other generations began joining TikTok. And that really does help to add to its wealth of content and perspective. At the same time, you will see generation wars on TikTok. So a dance trend that is jumped on by Gen Z, the millennial generation, which is one generation older, like later 20s, early 30s, maybe early 40s, they'll sometimes jump on the trend just to kind of like start a little war. And often it's in fun camaraderie. Sometimes it's not. So TikTok really does have its own culture. And because everything kind of evolves so quickly, if we choose either as individuals or as a collective ministry to use TikTok, it's very important that we have the ability to kind of move and evolve with that culture and to discern how best to communicate in a way that will be understood by the people on TikTok. I kind of like to think of TikTok as its own country on the digital continent with its own language and its own culture. And if we can begin to understand it that way, we can kind of come to an understanding of are we being called to be present on this particular platform or in this particular country, or is the Lord calling someone else who is more equipped? We may answer yes, we may answer no in that discernment with the Spirit, but it is a very important question to ask. The unique thing about TikTok is because of the way it was established, it is not meant for things like advertising or like sharing an upcoming event or project, for longer stories or witnesses. It's not meant for that. And there's absolutely no patience for it either when people try to test the waters that way. So it is very important to be able to work with the system. There is a religious presence on TikTok, for better or for worse, across various religions. So you'll see very beautiful and powerful Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Buddhist presences On TikTok, you'll also see like a huge rise in witchcraft and, you know, how to use tarot cards and things like that. So it's good to know that these are things that people are engaging with. And often it's actually the same people who engage with all of them because they have a spiritual interest. So they're looking and they're testing and they're, you know, it's like a buffet. They're like sampling to see what takes, so to speak. Um, as religious on TikTok, it has been very important for us as daughters of St. Paul to create a space where people are safe to ask questions or to challenge one another or to discuss things. And as Elizabeth mentioned for the other platforms, that does mean we have to be very discerning in what comments we allow to stay up and what comments we do not. TikTok tends to get a lot more hostile far more quickly than any other platform. So we use the delete button and the block button far more liberally than we do on any other platform because of that. So we'll often have people attacking each other in the comments that has nothing to do with the video that was posted. So for example, in the last video that we posted that the BBC covered in their coverage of us, it was a video about prayer. And we had a lot of Muslims jumping on and saying, oh my gosh, I so relate to being late for prayer. This really beautiful ecumenical moment that we could come together and share what it means to like desire to gift a special time to the Lord. And then of course people are jumping on like criticizing Muslims, attacking that particular religion. So we took down all of those comments and we actually let the people know we're so sorry that this happened and please know that you have our prayers and our support. So it's good to know that you will have beautiful community blossoming in the comments, as well as things you have to monitor and decide what to do with. It's also been neat to see how various Catholics have kind of come onto TikTok in very different styles, which is good. Because TikTok relies very heavily on trends and humor, it's really cool to see people taking that on in a way that has been discerned. A lot of trends are not appropriate for many people to jump on, let alone religious, but some of them are really, really fun. So there are some dance trends that like you could very, very easily, modestly not have to worry about anything and participate in. There have been trends like when the movie Encanto came out, people were taking the song We Don't Talk About Bruno and they were reenacting it. And there were some priests who were reenacting it in ways that were hilarious and got a lot of interaction in the comments of people saying, you know, I was always afraid of priests, but actually you're okay. So that was really beautiful to see. I think the last thing I wanted to leave you all with was something that we have really encountered as daughters of St. Paul has been, how do we discern whether or not we wanted to even be on TikTok? And how did we discern how to use it? So what trends to use, what trends to ignore, and when to post something that had nothing to do with a trend. So for us, a lot of prayer goes into this because again, TikTok is not meant to be used for advertising or for sharing graphics or anything like that. So the content that we put out on TikTok is specifically like storytelling and humorous for that particular audience and very, very concise. So one of the things that we've really had to ask ourselves is what need of humanity, as our founder puts it, what need of humanity do we see that people are really hungry to be fed for that is present on TikTok? And are we being called to meet that need or is someone else being called to meet that need? One of the needs that we have noticed that we do feel called to respond to is the need for prayer and the confusion of how to pray. So those are things that we've been putting up videos that just kind of hint at it so people have an opportunity to talk about it with us in the chat. Another thing is, do we have the ability to communicate authenticity, which is very important to this particular crowd, in a way that they can understand? And how much sharing is too much sharing? So that's kind of a balance that we want to discern on TikTok because they want to see they want to see you in your real life. They want to see you as a human. But at the same time, we all know that any human needs boundaries and not everything should be shared in public, even just for our own integrality. So that's something we've kind of, walked the line on. Another one is how do we take preventative measures for security concerns? So how do we make it clear that something is coming from us? And how do we protect our own content? Because TikTok does have a feature that allows people to take your videos and reuse them however they want to. And in some cases, that's really fun. And in some cases, it's absolutely disrespectful. So we're very careful in how we allow people to use our content. And I guess the last one would be just kind of monitoring those cultural changes and those cultural needs that exist on TikTok, and seeing again, where is the Lord calling us to speak and when is he asking us to be silent and to wait for him, you know? So yeah, I would say that, like, because of the generational reality, it is very important, if you choose to venture onto TikTok, make sure that you have a sister who's running it who understands cybersecurity, who understands, as Elizabeth was saying, like the idea of a crisis response kind of thing, and who is also able to check in with a larger group of sisters for inspiration, for accountability, and to get ideas for content that can be shared authentically. So I hope that's helpful. And if you want to look up some really fun Catholic accounts, I put some links in the email that I sent to Rob if you want to get some inspiration.
Thank you so much. Gosh, I'm already learning a lot, and I'm glad you talked about authenticity right at the end, because I wanted to ask you about that. So what I'd like to do, though, we are getting questions in the chat. Again, please pay attention to the chat as we're adding links there and so forth. But first, I'd like to see if we can check in with Laura to see if we were able to get a better connection.
Yeah, Robert, what we'll try with Laura, we have just a small technical problem with the interpreters. So just we need 1 minute to restore the interpretation tool. So Sister Therese will help us to do that.
Okay.
In the meantime, we can check the chat, and I invite the two speakers to read the questions because they are very precise. Laura, I hope that you can connect well now. We will try in 1 minute.
Well, why don't we do that? Why don't we ask a question for each presenter? And you know, there was one question, I think, directed toward Elizabeth about, actually from Marcia. Hi, Marcia. About strategy that brings the greatest number of followers to Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Yeah, but don't answer now because we don't have the interpreters. So just a second. Okay. You can do that later. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
I just wait for Therese to tell us if it's okay.
Okay. We want to remain inclusive. So bear with us for a moment. Thank you. You can check the mini links in the chat. One thing to add while we're waiting is that if you have other questions that aren't answered during this webinar, that you can connect with the speakers afterwards and they'll respond to you.
Thank you, Robert. We are ready. Laura, ¿qué tal? Vamos a intentar, si no, tenemos que dejarte.
A ver, ¿me oís bien ahora?
Ahora sí, esperamos que siga así.
A ver si dura. Sí, perfecto. Muchísimas gracias por la invitación. Se me ha pedido, ¿no?, que os comparta cuál es el trabajo que realizamos en el proyecto comunicativo, que es un proyecto informativo periodístico de Cataluña Religió. Os voy a compartir la presentación. Esto. A ver, vamos allí. Os me decís, ¿sí? Un poco con este ítem, ¿no?, de cómo trabajar en redes sociales para ganar visibilidad, ¿no? Cataluña Religió es un proyecto que concebemos de forma como una multiplataforma. Y ahora os voy a contar exactamente qué significado tiene esto, cómo lo entendemos, pero antes me parece pertinente contaros dónde estamos, ¿sí? Porque Catalunya Religió es la marca, pero se debe pues, a una ubicación geográfica, concretamente a un país, ¿sí? Cataluña, con 7 millones y un poco más de habitantes. Estamos en el noreste de la península ibérica, ¿sí? Y nuestra capital más conocida, sí, Barcelona, la ciudad de Barcelona. Entonces, estamos dirigiéndonos a una comunidad de hablantes de 13 millones de personas. Más allá de Cataluña, pues hay comunidades que hablan catalán en Italia, en el norte, en el sur de Francia, ¿sí? Y en otros lugares, en Andorra, por ejemplo, ¿no? Países pequeños pero cercanos. Entonces, para que os hagáis una idea de esta comunidad que tiene una actividad importante a nivel informativo, Wikipedia, que es la enciclopedia, ¿no? Por todos conocida, una enciclopedia de acceso libre. Si comparamos a la comunidad catalana con la española a nivel de entradas de páginas creadas, mientras que, ¿no?, la comunidad catalana tiene 704.000 artículos publicados, en la española estamos hablando de 1.700.000 artículos, ¿no? Está claro que no hay una proporción directa entre lo que entre una comunidad y la otra a nivel numérico, pero sí hay este cambio, este salto en cuanto a producción, ¿no? Y si nos fijamos, hoy me pasaban este dato que me parece también relevante, a nivel de artículos tipificados, a nivel de calidad, por pues, los enlaces que se relacionen, etcétera, a nivel de Wikipedia también el catalán está posicionado muy, muy bien. Esto lo cuento porque es una realidad pequeña, ¿no?, nuestro país, pero hay terreno para labrar, ¿no? Y a nivel de información religiosa, nosotros partimos de estos datos, ¿no? Pues que en nuestra población hay un 70% de personas que se identifican con alguna confesión religiosa, prácticamente más de la mitad con el catolicismo, que el hecho religioso continúa siendo noticia en muchos ámbitos, sea social, cultural o político, y que las instituciones religiosas tienen una presencia muy amplia en un montón de lugares. Saben ustedes mejor que yo, en Cataluña también es así, en el mundo educativo, universitario, en asociaciones que trabajan con infancia en el tiempo libre, etcétera, ¿no? Tercer sector, cultura, patrimonio. Entonces, hay una realidad peculiar que quería trasladarles también y que creo que es importante para la Unión, ¿no?, y las congregaciones, que es contarles cómo hemos trabajado nosotros, cómo hemos podido crear un medio de comunicación especializado en religión, que es líder en audiencia y que es líder también para otros profesionales de la comunicación no especializados que necesitan criterios, ¿no?, y que acuden a nosotros. Nosotros tenemos una base informativa a partir de las comunidades y a partir de diferentes instituciones religiosas, entre las cuales están los claretianos, están las hermanas carmelitas de la Caridad Vedruna, los hermanos maristas, jesuitas, Escola Pía, lasalianos, salesianos, ¿no?, Compañía de María, etcétera, 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 ¿no? Comunidades monásticas, universidades también de inspiración cristiana, grupos, asociaciones de justicia y paz, y una muy significativa que la van a encontrar aquí en medio, que es la Unión de Religiosos de Cataluña, que vendría a ser un equivalente de la Unión Internacional de Superiores Religiosas, aunque abierta pues, a toda la familia, todas las familias religiosas con presencia en Cataluña, ¿sí? Para nosotros son un nodo importante porque nos ofrecen mucha información, ¿no? Sigo adelante porque quería contarles que esto desemboca en la creación de una página web inicialmente, que por cierto hoy estrenamos nuevo formato, o sea que si quizá alguien entra en cataluñareligio.cat puede que vea algo fuera de lugar, pero estamos en momento de pruebas. Entonces nacemos como una página web pero para nosotros es muy importante esta franja, ¿no?, que hay aquí en la parte superior de la página, donde hay todas estas iconas, ¿no? Tenemos, creamos productos en podcast, estamos en Facebook, en Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, creamos formatos, recogemos las informaciones más destacadas en PDF y también hemos empezado a experimentar en TikTok, ¿no? Cuando nos planteamos la dinámica de redes, siempre buscamos un equilibrio entre los contenidos y la difusión, ¿no? Aquí hay como una tensión. ¿Qué dedicas de recursos a crear y qué dedicas, ¿no?, de los recursos humanos que tienes, temporales, los que sea, a difundir eso que has creado? Porque puede ser muy bonito y ser estupendo, ser un contenido muy rico y profundo, pero que no lo llegue a conocer nunca a nadie porque no estamos contándolo, ¿no?, más allá de nuestra página web. Entonces, sí que antes de desplegar cómo trabajamos en redes, quería contarles cuáles son nuestros 4 ejes, ¿no?, o cómo entendemos la comunicación en Catalunya Religió. Una es que el valor del nodo, ¿no?, o cuál es nuestro subrayado nivel editorial, ¿no? Todas aquellas noticias que realcen el valor de caminar juntos, para nosotros son importantes. Es decir, si tenemos que elegir entre una noticia que habla de una iniciativa concreta de una congregación o una noticia concreta de una congregación que está en camino y ha iniciado un proyecto de colaboración con otra o con otra religión, eso nos interesa más, ¿sí? Aquí hacemos una apuesta. Del mismo modo, hacemos apuesta por todo lo que tenga que ver con la transformación social y esta sensibilidad por todo aquello que afecta a las personas más vulnerables. Esta es otra de las prioridades de nuestro proyecto. En tercer lugar, de forma más reciente, pero yo creo que ha sido marca de la casa, aunque ahora hemos puesto más recursos en ello, trabajamos también por la visibilidad de la mujer en la Iglesia y en el resto de religiones. Concretamente, estamos financiando un espacio de blog, de opinión, para que haya firmas, ¿no?, de mujeres, porque la experiencia nos dice que si lo dejamos de forma libre y abierta, quizá esta opinión no llegue nunca a salir, ¿no? Y luego nos hemos dado cuenta que ejercemos una función de traductores del hecho religioso. Y aquí, parte de nuestro trabajo y función es con otros medios generalistas. Es decir, nosotros estamos especializados, somos periodistas, una redacción muy pequeña, pero periodistas que seguimos el día a día de las religiones. Sabemos un montón de cosas que otros no saben, tenemos contexto, tenemos criterio y muchas veces, ¿no?, los periodistas acuden a nosotros para saber y para entender. Entonces, dicho esto, que era el marco, ¿no?, más de contenidos, aquí siempre hay esta tensión, ¿no?, de encontrar el equilibrio entre contenidos y difusión y tener un punto de creatividad. ¿Qué hemos hecho hasta ahora? Aquí planteaba la máquina de escribir Olivetti, que deben todos conocer, ¿no?, que a veces no se puede utilizar, ¿no?, evidentemente, herramientas que no corresponden al momento actual. Donde está la gente, pues está en redes, no podemos ir imprimiendo papeles únicamente, ¿no? Entonces, ¿cuáles son nuestras plataformas de difusión? Actualmente estamos mandando un boletín diario donde hay una sección de clipping, entonces nos da una visión general de cómo los medios tratan el hecho religioso, donde publicamos nuestras propias entrevistas y contenidos, reportajes, espacios de opinión, ¿no? Este boletín llega a 6.000 suscriptores y recientemente hemos incorporado, nuestro target es el público catalán, ¿no?, como os decía, en este pequeño país de habla catalana y con esta comunidad de 10 millones de hablantes, pero entendemos que es muy importante comunicar cómo se vive la Iglesia aquí al mundo, ¿no? Y recientemente iniciamos también una newsletter en italiano que enviamos una vez a la semana con las informaciones más destacadas, 3 o 4 noticias que creemos que son de interés más allá de nuestro país, y también una newsletter en castellano con la misma dinámica, ¿no?, de traducir las piezas que consideramos más relevantes y llegar y acceder así a una comunidad hispanohablante mucho mayor. Por el camino nos hemos inventado también una edición en papel. Nacimos en el espacio web, pero consideramos que el papel permanece, ¿no? Y nos ha ayudado esto, el hecho de imprimir, a ser presentes en lugares y a públicos que quizá no nos conocían solo en el digital, ¿no? Distribuimos 20.000 ejemplares en parroquias, comunidades, centros sociosanitarios, enviamos a los donantes, gente que da soporte a este proyecto, que es de acceso gratuito y abierto, pero evidentemente necesita una financiación. Mandamos también a responsables y líderes de diferentes confesiones, ¿no? Instituciones, escuelas, ¿no? Y evidentemente comunidades religiosas. Lo reciben en las casas, ¿no? Este es un proyecto que es posible porque entre el boletín diario que hacemos en formato newsletter, cada semana creamos un PDF, que es un resumen con lo más destacado. Y del resumen semanal hemos elaborado también este de carácter mensual, bimensual. Presencia en redes, como contábamos, ¿no? Nuestros circuitos, pues es muy importante que todo lo que nosotros estamos creando tenga muchas posibilidades de llegar, ¿no? Y cuanta más presencia en redes sociales, pues más posibilidad de éxito en este sentido. Estamos en Facebook. Cabe decir que la estrategia, por el momento y en función de la publicación, pero básicamente son publicaciones automatizadas. Esto no es que esté penalizado en la red, pero somos conscientes que pediría una elaboración más a fondo, ¿no? Pero por ahora las noticias más importantes salen en Facebook y en Twitter sin que nosotros tengamos que pensar en crearlas. Si vamos a cubrir un acto, vamos a estar tuiteando o vamos a estar emitiendo en directo, pero hay un trabajo de fondo que se puede ir haciendo a nivel, pues esto, automatizado con herramientas que existen. Estamos también en Instagram, aquí sí que las publicaciones son manuales, y estamos también en YouTube con 1.700 suscriptores al canal. En YouTube nos sirve, cabe decir, y es importante tenerlo en cuenta, que es el segundo buscador más importante del mundo. Primero es Google, luego estamos en YouTube, ¿no? Cuando la gente busca, sobre todo, testimonios de vida religiosa, acude mucho aquí, ¿no? Y muchas congregaciones nos han contado que han tenido vocaciones nuevas, ¿no? A partir de gente que ha encontrado pues, un relato en las redes sociales, concretamente en YouTube, ¿no? Y finalmente ya 2 servicios más que hemos abierto recientemente. Las noticias que creemos también más relevantes o que son más de última hora y pueden tener un interés especial. Hemos creado una lista de suscripción en WhatsApp y una en Telegram, que funcionan bastante bien aquí. Y son listas unidireccionales en las que no hay ruido y en las que garantizas pues, un enlace y poder acceder a las noticias más. También, como comentaba, estamos en podcast. La filosofía del podcast es reunir a la redacción y que una vez por semana podamos comentar los temas más destacados de la semana. Aquí hay un ejercicio también de pensar, ¿no? De hacer línea editorial, pero evidentemente hay una apuesta de dar una segunda vida a los contenidos que creamos, ¿no? Que puedan tener, como decíamos, más opciones de llegar a su público. Y contaba que estábamos también en YouTube. Sí que me gustaría destacar, y acabo con esto, que durante el confinamiento, gracias a que tenemos antenas en todas estas redes sociales, gracias a que todas las congregaciones, instituciones que nos dan, ¿no? que nos apoyan, gracias a todo este conocimiento y visión en red, fue posible crear un documental en confinamiento contando cuál era la acción de la Iglesia Católica durante la pandemia, ¿no? Y concretamente durante el periodo pues, que estábamos todos encerrados en casa. Es accesible en Internet. Si buscan Iglesia Confinada Animaset, que es la productora con la que trabajamos, pueden acceder a este documental que es abierto público, dura media hora y está subtitulado en diferentes idiomas, inglés incluido. ¿Sí? Y la zona experimental donde estamos trabajando ahora, nuestra reflexión de fondo para estar en TikTok es que nosotros no podemos exigir al mundo que haga un esfuerzo en comprender el lenguaje religioso, sino que tenemos que hacer trabajo, ¿no?, para hacerlo comprensible. Y a la misma vez entendemos que nosotros no podemos empatizar con los jóvenes si no estamos comprendiendo su lenguaje y si no estamos donde están ellos, ¿no? Y en TikTok pues estamos experimentando, hay una persona que se dedica a ello y bueno, vamos a ver los frutos que va a dar. De momento no, estamos ahí contando cosas de religiones. Esta me la salto, si luego hay más preguntas os lo cuento y nada más. Por mi parte, muchísimas gracias. Espero que se haya oído todo bien, que estéis ahí porque yo no os he visto y que no haya habido interrupciones.
Se escuchó muy bien. Gracias, Laura.
Gracias, Laura. Thank you. Since you finished with TikTok, maybe that's a good question to move to for both of you. How do you present yourselves as authentically in that space when maybe you're an older generation and you're kind of new to the platform? How do you kind of present yourself authentically on TikTok?
Robert, may I just suggest to leave to take some other questions and to leave then, because we have just a few minutes before we close, and we can leave again the floor to the three of our speakers and to recuperate some of the questions that are in the chat. So I invite Elizabeth, Oriana, Laura to read that. And also, I have another question to add to the three of them, which is the issue of engagement. Because the social media is based on engagement. So how are you able to build and to nurture the engagement of your audience in the social media? So if we can give the 3 minutes to the three of them just to comment and react also to the others' testimonies after listening the three of them. Thank you. So I will open. Sorry. So yeah, I think Elizabeth can start, and then Oriane, and then Laura.
So we're starting with that engagement question. So that's a great question about engagement. So again, for us, it's all about building that community and encouraging that engagement. So we really try to respond, especially if we get questions or individuals who say something really poignant. We really do try to respond to comments as much as we can. On things like Twitter, we try to engage with people we follow as much as we can, to be part of conversations that are happening. Say if something big happens about the death penalty, because anti-death penalty is one of our things, we really try to retweet and stay in those kinds of conversations, encourage people to engage with us in those ways. So for us, it's just about building that community to encourage engagement and to being open to having those conversations, sometimes difficult ones, on our social platforms. So for us, so much of it is about just encouraging continued communication to help engagement. And I mentioned, I know we do use some ads if we think that we need to be like broadening our engagement to a wider audience. Sometimes we will boost posts as well to encourage a broader engagement. So that's another strategy we use.
Thank you, Laura. Oriane, would you like to comment, react? You cannot unmute yourself. Okay.
Thank you. I think two of the things that we have found effective is bringing that authenticity that Robert was referring to. So really being able to show people a degree of our vulnerability and a degree of our struggles and how the Lord has brought us through them. Because I think a lot of people do have the idea in their heads that people who are religious because they have never suffered, or they are religious because they are angry and it's an outlet for them. But what we desire to show is that our joy comes from a peace that has been gifted to us in our struggle and in our suffering. And that means a lot to people. A lot of our community has formed around conversations about that. The other thing is some platforms have a very fine-tuned algorithm, and that algorithm, it's not our law. We move with the Holy Spirit. But at the same time, when it is possible for us to take advantage of the algorithm without it, changing our decisions, it's good to take advantage of the algorithm. So if we know that at 4 p.m., let's say, it's the best time to post, or if we know that using a certain audio will kind of boost the algorithm's ability to share that video or put it in front of people who don't already follow us, then those are decisions we might make if they don't change the reality of our content, or if they don't negatively affect the person in charge of posting and monitoring it. So those are two that I would add. Yeah.
Thank you, Rian. And I'm aware that Laura's experience is really actually different from the other two because it's more a magazine. So Laura, how do you react to this issue on engagement? What are the difficulties that you have?
Sí, a ver si se oye, que ahora os volvía yo a oír un poco entrecortados. Sí. Yo veo dos cosas. Sí, yo veo dos cosas aquí. Una es que el compromiso con el público consiste en la cotidianidad, o sea, el estar presente, ¿no? En el normalizar estas vidas, ¿no? Como decía ahora, hay algo de... Hay una proximidad en el hecho de que te vayas frecuente. Por lo tanto, es importante pasar eso lento, que
Laura, no te escuchamos, lo siento. We keep having technical problems. I'm sorry, Laura, it's very difficult to listen to you. So I think I'm sorry for that. If you want to say something in the chat, you can do it in English, so perhaps the majority can understand. I'm also aware, and I want to beg your pardon, that we had a big problem with the French translation. We don't know why we couldn't solve, but we will make available the French translation of the video in the following days. So I'm very sorry for the French speaking person, but we will do our best. So thank you very much. I will leave the flow for the other information.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us, and we're a little past the top of the hour. There are other questions in the chat, but we have these resources to share with you afterwards. And if you haven't had a chance to have a question answered, if you see in the chat, all of our presenters have offered their contact information, and you can follow up with them there. So in the meantime, I do want to thank each of our panelists. Wonderful presentations today. Thank you so much. And also to our interpreters and specialists behind the scenes. It's difficult to broadcast around the world in multiple languages, and appreciate all of your efforts very much. We do have another CWR and UISG collaborative webinar in October on crisis communications. That's October 19th. You can look for the recordings of this content today on CWR's website and UISG's YouTube channel. and you can expect a survey to follow as well. So again, thank you so much for joining us today, and until we see you in October, we pray for peace where you are and hope that you may find time away to restore your soul. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I want just to add one more information that actually the UISG and CWR are planning also for further formation for 2022 and 2023. And also the UISG is planning a continental and international meetings of communicators for women religious. So in 2023, we will have the first international online meeting of all the communicators for women religious. So we will have intermediate steps towards this horizon. So this is just an announcement for you, but with CWR and UISG, MMI, we are really working together. So thank you very much and see you in October. Thank you, Robert. Thank you all.
Thank you.